as you're using that device, you must work in the assumption that every single thing that you're doing on it, someone else is listening into it, someone else is intercepting it, because it's that easy to do.
Labour and the Liberal Democrats are calling on the government to open an investigation into claims that Liz Truss had her phone hacked when she was Foreign Secretary, and that Boris Johnson and his Cabinet Secretary covered it up. The Mail on Sunday reports that the hack was discovered during the leadership contest in the summer, but the news was suppressed. It also says private messages between the former PM and officials overseas had fallen into foreign hands. Philip Ingram is a security expert and a former colonel in the British Army. Philip, good morning.
Good morning, Callum.
How hackable should the phone of a foreign secretary be?
Well, it should be unhackable. There should be a secure phone that is issued, and that is the only phone that is used for anything. But government ministers, MPs, and opposition leaders use their personal phones for a lot of work-related activity, and it needs to stop.
Yeah. In terms of, I suppose, how this works and how a phone could be compromised, you would expect government to kind of be pretty resilient to such things. I wonder what your analysis is on how this can happen.
Well, you would be, especially when the Mail on Sunday actually exposed that on the 1st of October, a long list of government ministers' phones and opposition leaders' phones whose numbers had been compromised on an open website. And a big long list, including a lot of their personal logins to different things. And you could buy those numbers for as little as £6.50. And this is an extrapolation of that. I commented in that article that you could easily put the sort of Israeli-type Pegasus software, but if the NSO company had developed it, you can guarantee that the Russians and the Chinese have got their own versions of it. You can put that onto any phone where you've got the number on it by sending a message, and someone doesn't even need to open that message for that software to be put in the phone and the phone to be compromised. So I suspect Liz Truss is not the only one, and I suspect it's not just government ministers, but those in the opposition that are calling for investigations probably need to look at their own phones as well.
Really interesting. I suppose the journalist in me is quite taken by the idea that this information was suppressed during a leadership contest to choose the next Conservative leader and the country's next Prime Minister. One argument in favour of suppression is that there's a war on, and that actually not giving away the fact that this hack has happened is actually more helpful for the war effort, and I mean this on the Ukrainian side, i.e. it's not kind of then become helpful for Russian propaganda purposes. Would you fall on one particular side of that discussion?
I treat that with a very large pinch of salt. Yes, it would fall on Russian propaganda side of things, but that would be minor. I think it's more important that the information gets out around all of the government ministers and MPs and opposition leaders as well, so that there can be a big check to try and see what might have been compromised, and then someone look at the wider risk assessment on that. Now, I'm assuming that is what has happened here, reading between the lines of the report in today's Mail on Sunday, that Liz Truss's phone has been taken to a secure government facility and is being analysed to look at that compromise. But it's the wider piece as well, because she'll be communicating with other people. Anyone who's got the right honourable, whether you're in government or you're in opposition, is getting top secret briefings, and they'll be passing that round their inner teams. If they're doing that on insecure means, that means it's almost certainly been intercepted and will be out there in the hands of our enemies.
I just want to ask you as well, Philip, about Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, and I ask this because of a development in the last few minutes, actually, from the BBC, who bring a further detail in this kind of controversial reappointment, really, of Suella Braverman. An email sent from Braverman's personal account on the day she had to resign over a security breach, the BBC says could throw fresh doubt over her claims about the speed with which she took action. The email seen by the BBC told the recipient of a highly sensitive message that Braverman had sent in error to delete and ignore it. So there's a political implication here, but there's also the kind of security angle on this in terms of using which email account you're using and who you're sending things to, I suppose.
There is, and it's quite complex. Unless we know exactly what it was that people are saying was this top secret material, I doubt it's top secret material. I suspect it's politically sensitive material that's been put in there. And then it's the owner of whoever drafted that actually sets the classification. So if she wrote it herself and it's in draft, you get into a number of different regulations. There's the Cabinet Office who's responsible for overall security of government documentation. They've put guidelines out that ties in the Official Secrets Act and everything else that says what you do with formal documents and emails. But there's also guidelines that allow you under certain circumstances to use your private emails for certain things. Now, it's almost certain that Suella Braverman, because of the nature of the position she's in and all the rest of it, has gone beyond those guidelines for use of private emails. But where it fits into everything else, there's too much speculation out there, and that speculation is tied to emotion and tied to political point scoring. What we need is the reality.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Philip. I suppose in the grand scheme of everything, our government, our politicians, too gung-ho about their phones, technology, and actually they're a bit illiterate when it comes to keeping communications secure, using the right apps, using the right email accounts, for goodness sake. Is it actually just ignorance here that's playing a big part?
It's huge ignorance, and I think it's our politicians. I think it's a hugely wider societal piece. People don't realize, and they don't work on the assumption that as you're using that device, you must work in the assumption that every single thing that you're doing on it, someone else is listening into it, someone else is intercepting it, because it's that easy to do. If you work in that principle, then and you do your normal work on only secured means and everything else, speed is not of the essence. And the trouble is, people want to do everything so fast. That's why they use this, and they're compromising what they're doing.
Yeah. It's really interesting, Philip. So good to speak to you. Thanks for your analysis. Thanks for joining us this morning. Philip Ingram, security expert and former colonel in the British Army.